Hey everybody, welcome to this AMP session. AMP stands, which is AMP, stands for the Agent Mentoring Program. And our Agent Mentoring Program is really designed to be able to either share stories or skills with all of us as a team so we can learn from each other. And that old saying, iron sharpens iron, together we work together to become better agents, to treat our clients to a better caliber of agent, and to learn more and earn more. So today we're able to welcome Richard Kerr to AMP. And Rich, you're going to be talking about the subject of help. My client wants to do an auction.
I am.
But before we jump into that, I just want to say to those that haven't been following your story or don't know who you are, Richard Kerr is an auctioneer. He's also with EXP, and you are based in Perth, Western Australia, but that's not where you were born. Tell us where you're from originally.
Oh, don't hold it against me. I'm a Kiwi from across the ditch. And yeah, I've been here since 95, back and forwards a couple of times. But yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and one of the great things about Richard is that he brings to this conversation today is he's done over 3,000 auctions as an auctioneer, and he has recently just won the top auctioneer for Western Australia, the REWA competition. So REWA is our real estate industry body here in Western Australia, and he competed in the Gift of the Gavel, which is the auctioneering competition, and he was numero uno. So he was the number one, which has then seen him get the opportunity to be on Channel 9 locally here and also on radio stations here, talking about auctions and doing some auctions, but also, I suppose, really important for him as a Kiwi, he's won a trip back home to compete in the Australasian Auctioneering Championship. So well done, Richard.
Thank you. Thanks,
And
Ross.
I know it was a big a goal of yours to get back in the competition ring and those kind of things. So um, to set the stage for those that are live with us now or maybe watching the replay as a tool for later, traditionally in Australia, depending on where you are, the majority of sales are done by private treaty. But an agent might find themselves in an appraisal situation or talking with a client, and a client saying, I've been watching The Block, I've been watching some television show, whatever. I'd like to give auction a go. And if an agent's never done that before, it can seem quite scary. But Rich, tell us a little bit about auctions, and I'll ask some questions along the way. But just give us
Sure.
the 30-second why auctions.
Yeah, of course. Look, I got put onto them, just under 20 years ago. It wasn't so much like today's, here, you could try this or try that. We were told, do auctions.
Yeah.
And Muggins here listed 5 blocks of land for my first, all next to each other for my first auction. And I really had no idea how to do it the whole way through, but got a bit of coaching, and all 5 of them went under the hammer. And then I sort of thought, wow, this is quite a good way to sell. Had a great auctioneer, spent a lot of time doing auctions with that auctioneer. Then that auctioneer moved away. Funny enough, an Australia, a Perth guy moved to New Zealand. And then the subsequent auctioneers just weren't much chop. And being an arrogant little fella, as we all probably were 20 years ago, I thought, I can do that. And so I was over in New Zealand and took up the challenge of being an auctioneer, which has been a great journey ever since. Yeah. Is that
Yeah.
30 seconds? Or?
Yeah, no, that's really
Yeah.
good. And just with that, from an auctioneer's perspective,
Yeah.
when you see, like, regardless of whether it's auction or private treaty or whatever, properties may or may not sell for a
Yeah.
variety of reasons. But from the agent's perspective, what are some of the main reasons that properties don't sell at auction?
Well, probably the biggest reason I can think from an auctioneer and an agent side is the main reason is you don't give people enough reason to turn up and bid. Like, people are going to be nervous, worried about turning up and bidding unless it doesn't matter who they are. And to that end, it's quite often people have treated an auction process like a private treaty.
Right.
And whilst that may sound a bit daft, it's more like with private treaty, you get it on, the idea is to sell it as well. And at the moment, it seems to be in vogue to sell it as quickly as possible. With an auction, you're actually trying, it sounds counterlogical, you're trying to gather a crowd for auction day. And the reason they often don't sell is that the agents have overcooked them, spoken too highly of what the owner's expectations are.
Yep.
Or they've just made reasons for people not to think, oh yeah, I could get a decent buy here.
Yep. Okay. So let's go back to our poor sales representative sitting somewhere in front of a client, and the client says, "Yep, hey, can we do an auction?" What's the first step of that process? Is it similar to private treaty, or is it completely different? Or
I thought you meant the thought bubble in the agent's head, so I won't say that on a PG-rated show like this.
Yeah.
Oh, golly gosh.
Hey, we want to do auction. Oh.
Yeah, excellent. It's probably the word that comes to mind. But no, the first stage is listing the property. It's just that the process is different. So I'll just speak to WA because I'm not sure of the legislation elsewhere.
Yeah.
The first stage is list the property, go through all the criteria on your listing forms, disclosure statements. And then when talking about the process, that's probably when the differences come in.
Okay. So let's assume that the agent's licensee has helped them get the correct paperwork and it's actually listed for auction. Where do we go from there? What's the process that normally is working?
Yeah, the process is, whether it's myself or whoever's the auctioneer, get in touch with your auctioneer. You're a team through this. I know that sounds a little bit cliche maybe, but instead of guessing what you do, the auctioneer will have been through it hundreds, thousands, dozens, whatever times. Let them walk you through the process, because some people have done auctions years ago and haven't done one for maybe a decade or years. And things have changed, the way we do it. So it's more like, okay, it's the easiest way I can think of it is, remember as a kid, there were those pictures with paint by numbers?
Yes.
Like red, it's kind of like that. The process, and that's not to downplay what we do, but the process is quite structured. And get with the auction, you've got to get the documentation on display, but the main thing is not trying to sell it. That'd be the first thing, which is I found so hard. Yep. And when I say not trying to sell it, of course that is their objective, we're going to sell it, but not trying to sell it to the first person comes through. It's trying to gather that crowd of interested buyers for auction day.
Right. And so if I'm hearing you correctly, step one, build a crowd.
Yep. Spot on.
So we'll assume that we're working on a 4-week auction campaign, which is normal in Western Australia.
It's most common at the moment, yeah.
Yeah, we've got a start date, so that'll be our first open, and we might have 3 other opens, and then the auction on the 4th week.
Yeah, that's right.
So in that first week, what's the agent really trying to do? Is it just focused on marketing and getting bodies through the property, or?
To be fair, the agent's trying to build their first week report. Like if we get 10, 15, 20 people through or more, as we often see at the moment, they're trying to get feedback and a price from every single person that comes through. Because I get to see a lot of people's vendor reports, and I used to hate vendor reports until I realized that was the key, whether it be auction or what have you. They might have, let's say they have 20 groups through and they'll have 3 bits of price feedback. Oh, they're the most interested people. No one else would give me a price. Like there's a lot of, you've got to educate the owner so that by the end of the campaign, they know exactly what 40 or 50 or 60 people have thought, good and bad, and price-wise about their home.
Okay. So if I'm an agent and you're just mentoring me through that process, so I've got my first open, I might have had 10 people through. Traditionally in a private treaty scenario, I'd ring the seller and say, hey, we had 10 groups through on the home open. It looks like Sally and Mary might be interested in it or whatever. But in this case, we want all those 10 people documented.
Yep.
We want them all some kind of a price point from what they're saying. Is that what I'm getting? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. We still do after the open, like sometimes I've done it and I've seen people do quick video messages to the, hey, great open, we had 10 people through. A couple of groups are showing a bit of interest, but I'll get back to you later. I mean, that's straight after the open.
Yes.
But the written report, at the moment, I'll just speak to Western Australia, you can pretty much get away without doing it thoroughly because the market is so short on supply
Yes.
that you just open the doors and people will come through.
But
I
if
know
we're,
that sounds, yeah.
but if we're trying to do it correctly, we want to have a detailed report, written
Yeah.
report.
Yeah.
And is that sent through to the seller each week?
Yeah, my thing used to be tell the sellers they'd have it by 6 p.m. on Tuesday. This is when I was the listing agent. And I say Tuesday because sometimes if you're doing both days on the weekend, it's a bit hard to get Sunday feedback in a timely fashion on Monday. If you get the report done earlier, send it straight through, followed up by a 10-minute meeting to discuss the report. Ideally face-to-face.
Yep.
Zoom or whatever's good. It's okay on the phone, but it's far better face-to-face so you can see their reaction. And it's really just going through the people. So they might say, oh, this Rob, he sounds like he's quite close to the money. Do you think he'll get his finance? Or this Richard sounds like an idiot. He's far too short on our number.
Yep.
Which effectively you can find where they are price-wise from the go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just listening to the cues of the seller going, gosh, that's pretty close. Or what are they? We're not giving it away. Those kind of conversations. It's an interesting one. I'm just gonna pop somebody on mute here. Hold on. And then so that sequence is repeated each week. Then
yeah, and it's cumulative. Like I say, the reports towards the end of it may take you an hour. But it's sort of there's week's one's feedback and there's week two and so on. Like I just saw the comment there. Yeah, Agent Box has really good sort of day-to-day catch-ups and things you can do. But this is just putting it out there. So they've got, because they'll often say, "Oh, we had a quick glance at it," and they'll be able to name every person in the report and what their price feedback and their likes and dislikes were, which is great because normally there's the seller's expectation and here's the market, and over the 3.5 weeks we're just trying to get the owners. They'll never probably quite get there towards there. And that's why you have the crowd. So we go upwards on the day, but it's sort of like drip feeding.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And for you guiding an agent, how many opens are they doing? 1 open, 2 opens a week? What's
generally 2 at the moment.
Yeah.
Because even though a lot of in WA, they're selling in the first week and 3 weeks seems like an eternity.
Yeah.
It goes pretty quickly. And it's getting you an unconditional offer. So doing 2, plus you're meeting more people. You're also being a lot more visible to the neighbours around. Gee, they always seem to be doing opens.
Yeah, they're working that property. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And can we just take a pause now from an agent's perspective? What do we need to be doing as far as educating the buyers? Because there'll be a lot of places in Australia where people aren't familiar with buying at auction. What does the agent need to be doing in that regard?
Being really, really open at opens and any interaction they have with our auction company. We have a little guide. I know a lot of real estate agencies have them, the guide to buying at auction. There's different variations. Learn that as the agent so that you know it off by heart, but make sure you give it. And at an open, when 2 things always seem to gather a crowd around, when the agent's standing there, someone will ask the price. And my advice is never talk price in a crowded open for various reasons. But the other thing, if someone asks about buying at auction, you just notice the whole room sort of shuffle on the spot and listen in like little meerkats. Yeah. And be bold and just explain it as well as you can. If you're not sure, get your auctioneer to turn up at some of the opens. I quite often get called, hey, can you just pop in? We're having a heap of buyers who aren't sure. Can you come and have a little Q&A?
Yeah.
And if I'm not doing an auction, I just, pop in.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I just want to interject here.
Sure.
Double check with your licensee in the state that you are in, because some states might be required to give a price guide, and other states you're not allowed to give a price guide. So just verify what the rules are in your state as you're going along. Here in Western Australia, we don't have to give a price guide, and it's more about ascertaining.
On that, Rob, we used to be told no price, nothing, lip sealed.
Yeah.
In this day and age, that doesn't really wash too well with the buyers. They're like, whatever. So if they're expecting have something, like we'll just use the example of $1 million. In the first week, you can say there hasn't been much feedback yet. We've had offers in the 9s upwards. always have a lower figure that at a push your owners might take, or if you're working with a price guide at the lower end of that, upwards. Never, ever, ever cap it, and never try and help the owners by bumping that price up, because all you'll do is alienate.
Yeah.
So for example, if it was, we all sort of thought it was $1 million property, chances are the owners will be chasing 1-1.
Yes.
But if you've had feedback, which normally would be the case, we've had feedback from the 900s upwards. Would you like to write an offer?
Yeah.
Is pretty much the best way to answer the price question.
And if someone is watching this for the first time and they've not had anything to do with auctions, can you just talk us through about the sales, like the A, B, and C of the sales process before, under the hammer, or after? Can you talk us through that, how a property can be sold?
Yeah, absolutely. You've possibly heard this. There's three phases: before the auction date, obviously at the auction, under the hammer, and post auction. The first two are generally, it's not written in law, unconditional offers only. So if we use that $1 million property, if someone came through with an offer of 1.5, you'd pretty much write it up, present it to the owner, and tickety-boo, it could be done. And I'm making a ridiculous figure on purpose. Conversely, if they had $1.1 million, but it was subject to finance, your general answer would be not to present it. But again, it's the owner's choice, because I've seen so many that, just a little bit of finance, the auction gets cancelled, and then the finance falls over.
And the finance falls over.
So they're obviously, it just kills everything. The auction day, I think everyone would be aware of the auction day. It's unconditional until it's sold. The second it passes in, which just simply means a lot of jargon there, that it's not sold under auction terms, it crosses over into private treaty. So any conditions, can finance, subject sale, etc., can be put in by anybody. That's why we actually encourage a lot of people who can't bid to turn up at the auction.
Yeah.
So that if it passes in, straight away they can write offers.
Yeah, that my very first auction a long time ago, the seller's expectations were here. 40 people standing in their back garden, no bids. and I'm standing there, and my auctioneer canceled on me. So I had a reserve auctioneer, and I didn't know him at all. And it was like, could anything else go wrong?
Don't ask that, because it will.
but the owner, I think at the time, wanted 520, and there was an underbidder at, not an underbidder, subject to finance buyer that was at 480. And there was not one bid, and they were the only interested party. Now, it took a couple of days for the seller, who was an engineer, and thought, we're going to work this process, and then miraculously something will happen. But eventually they came to the party and accepted a subject to finance offer. But it was just, if I had been working with you, I would have known what to do along that line much better. So no, that's good. Can we walk through now, maybe the week prior to the auction? What is something? So we've worked the first week, the second week, and the third week. We've been giving our vendor reports. We've been engaging with the buyers, those kind of things. We've been guiding them to make sure they can bid at auction and get themselves pre-qualified. That last 7 days going into the auction, what is most likely to happen? What should the agent be worried about? How should they be going?
Okay. The word exciting springs to mind. This is the week where your best buyer possibly might pull out. However, a random stranger might turn up and say, yeah, I'm actually quite keen. Yes, I understand auction. I can bid there. But it's just getting everything ready, making sure you've got your pack for the day, like the auction contracts, private treaty if it passes in, the sold sticker. That is, we'll talk about that later, not having a sticker. But also just following through. It's trying to keep right on top of your buyers without being a pain in the backside. But it's really each day, just have something. So just checking the terms are okay. You can settle on that day. You're okay for the deposit. And also, one of the biggest things lately is checking if they are ready to bid. They've spoken to their bank and they've upped their transfer limit on the phone, or the phone banking, or internet banking, because then they can transfer the deposit on the day. We get a lot of phone calls on Friday at 4 o'clock. Hey, how do we pay deposit? We can't take 20, 40, 100 grand out at the ATM. So having just it should be the whole way through, but just making sure everything's in order. One thing we always used to do here too was on the Friday, if it was a weekend auction, as late as you can, get another copy, a fresh copy of the title, because there's nothing like an excellent surprise of a new caveat that was launched at, lodged, at 4:59 on a Friday afternoon.
Yes.
That we've got the 2-month-old now from before they listed it, got the title.
Yeah.
That's one thing I'd say, and just make sure you've got your team ready. Sorry.
That's all right.
Just make sure you've got your team ready for the day. And
Yep.
by team, I mean, normally you'll have other people in the office. When I do auctions, I've got this bloke, Rob Davis, and he's excellent. He comes along, and Anne Smith, and there's a lot of, but have your team, because the auctioneer and you can run it, but it's great branding and marketing for your whole office if they see the whole team there. Because we always say real estate's a team sport, and I'm going to upset, hopefully not you, some people, but it's not. It's an individual sport. We're out in the opens by ourselves. We do deals if we're private treaty by ourselves. So if the public see a team of people working and assisting, I've had a lot of people lately, even there were a couple of properties passed in, and the neighbours, come up, could you do that for our place? We loved how your whole team was working.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, that's so good. So let's talk a little bit about the reserve set meeting. How does, in an ideal world, how do we do that? How do we set that up the best? And maybe just explain what a reserve is for someone that might not know. Yeah,
sure. A reserve, it's a written instruction. It's the lowest price that the auctioneer can sell for. So again, I'll use the $1 million example. If we had $1 million reserve and it was 999 and all the nines, can't sell unless all the people on the title and on this page cross out the million and put the new price. So legally, it's not a case of close. How that works is it's based on the feedback during the entire campaign. So you sort of collate the whole lot. Feedback's normally here. Generally, owner's price is somewhere that way. Yep. It's very seldom it's right there. The best campaigns I've seen, the owners, when we have, and I'll talk about the meeting in a second, they look at the agent and say, where do you reckon it should be? It's kind of music to an auctioneer's ears, because it shows trust. It shows that the agent's really worked hard and the owner knows they've got their best interests at heart. And it used to be quite a hard thing. Make sure you get a low reserve. The figure's a figure. Yep. But what we do and what your auctioneer should do is go through the consequences with the owner if we don't reach that. And if it passes in and people walk away from the crowd, what's our next move? Because if they're too high, the gavel isn't like a magic wand, and I'm not the Pied Piper with a heap of cash bidders running after me, but we normally do it on the Thursday. So if it's a Saturday, you want about 2 sleeps in between. And it can change right up to and even during the auction in writing. But it's more so that we're all on the same page.
It's an actual physical meeting where possible. You've got the auctioneer there, you've got the agent, you've got all the parties that are going to be selling the property, and Correct. It's really just setting out a game plan.
That's it, spot on. It's a game plan. It's a summary of the campaign. We've had so many people, they all think about here, where would you like a little bit higher? I often think if it's within 5 or 10% of where the feedback's been, it's going to be good. Depending, it can be higher if there's more bidders. But the lower the amount of bidders, the closer it kind of needs to be to there.
And then that leads me on to asking you about, on the day of the auction, what are the do's and don't do's?
Well, there's a lot. One of the don'ts is, apart from possibly your licensee, have the auctioneer, the agent, and the vendor know the reserve. There is nothing worse from an auctioneer's point of view as you're calling it, and some neighbour there goes, oh, we're only $5,000 away.
Yes.
That kills it there. Suddenly someone might put $50,000 back in their pocket because they just learned they don't have to spend that. That's it. Don't have a big night the night before, because it's going to be either super excitement or there's going to be a few twists and turns on the day. Normally really good excitement, but it's also you're on show. Okay. So, even if you think, oh, we've got no one in that, just the odd fake it till you make it. And this is for the agent. Be really positive, because people are watching you. Your prospective vendors are quite possibly at that auction. The neighbours who you think are just across the road come over after mowing the lawns and t-shirts and shorts. You don't know that they might be thinking of selling in a week, and they're just deciding whether we use you or someone else.
Yep.
So your energy has to be really high.
Yeah. No, that's good. And so you talked about being prepared on, let's say it's a Saturday auction, you prepared on the Friday. You got your sold stickers, you got your contracts, you got spare pens to sign contracts. You've got
spare contracts just in case. Yeah,
just in case, because I mean, you just never know what's going to happen. You could have someone wander into the kitchen where the contract is and wander out with the contract, and those kind of things. And so on the day, what is the agent's role? So the auctioneer will obviously take over at the appointed time. They'll do whatever, and eventually there'll be the question about starting the auction process. What should the agent be doing while the auctioneer is calling the auction?
Ideally be walking around, having teed up before. If any of the bidders need help, if you've got multiple bidders, don't always just have one person, because if they stop bidding, you'll need to go to the others. But just asking beforehand, do you need any help? A lot of people will say, nah, mate, I'm okay. But then they might get nerves, during the auction. So you want to just be there. Have some paper, a few sheets of A4 or on a clipboard, so that you jot down the bids. Because if someone's nervous, you want to be beside them writing down, say it's 500, right? Big 500,000, and you point maybe at 550 and sort of, would you go there? And you, as the agent, you can call it out on behalf of them if they've lost their voice or whatever. And just being sharp. Like there'll be times when the auctioneer will call for, can we get some instructions or what have you? That's all pre-arranged. Like in this time space, I'm just trying to sort of cram it in there.
And so we see like on TV. So just on that, we see on TV. I'll just seek some instructions from my vendor or whatnot. What's that agent meant to be doing when they're seeking the instructions? Let's say the reserve's at 950 and the bid's at 890, and it doesn't seem to be any more.
Yeah, that's a very common thing on the block and other TV shows. Theoretically, they're going to see if they can get their owner to reduce the reserve to where it is, call it on the market. So we're now selling. Doing it that way is quite dangerous, because if they call it on the market and there's no more bids, it's sold. There's nothing we can do. But that's generally what they're trying to do.
Right.
Get the reserve adjusted.
No, that's cool. So, and that would have all been discussed, hopefully, at the meeting on the Thursday.
Yeah, we let the owners know exactly what we're doing. There's probably a more in-depth one between agent and auctioneer.
Yes.
Like really drilling it down. If this happens, we're going to be going this way. If this happens, there's not a lot. It looks like it's left to chance, but there's not a heck of a lot left to chance.
Yeah. Now, I just want to recap here, and then I want to talk to you about one of your auctions that we had a few months ago. So we're going to list the property at auction. We're checking with our licensee to make sure we have the right paperwork, and if there's any scenarios that we need to do. Like in our state, there's certain paperwork that has to be on display at each of the opens through the process, that kind of stuff. Each week we are having a written report for the client with who's come through and what their feedback is, and ideally we're having a one-on-one sit down with our sellers and going through that information.
Just a 10-minute, Yep.
On the flip side of that, we're connecting with our buyers as they show interest along the way. We're trying to foster that crowd to be on the auction day and the auction time. We might be networking with the neighbors, making sure that they're aware the auction is coming and invite them to the auction and those kind of things. And then that leads us up to the reserve set that we have with the auctioneer. And with that, we're just talking about reality. Here's the collection of people that have been through the property. This is our game plan. This is what's going to happen on the auction day. The auctioneer is most likely going to guide them along that way. And for us as agents, it's not the time to be over optimistic. Like the feedback's at 900. We don't want to be going, but I think it's worth $1 million. We have to.
I've had a few lately with that scenario, and the person said, I think we can get the high 1.2s, 1.3, and I've kind of like, you're just out of range for me to gently tap you on the foot.
Yeah. Sometimes we want to defend our sellers so much because we build great relationships that we actually end up harming the sellers on the day. And then obviously we come to the auction day. Now I'm going to take you back a few months ago to Grady Court when we had an auction there. and just to kind of celebrate the auction process. So Richard listed a property at an auction campaign. I thought it was probably, without seeing it, I thought it was probably 430. Then the feedback was coming in, what, 460, 470, was it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we went to auction, and this crowd of people just came from nowhere. And what happened, Richard?
It was kind of funny. As the auctioneer, you try and keep everyone safe, but it was a cul-de-sac, so a lot of people bought deck chairs and they just blocked off the whole street. And I thought, because I wanted to use it as a case study to show people auctions did work in various areas.
Yeah.
I thought we might have 2 or 3 bidders. Luckily, I printed off 10 registration forms, and we had 9 registered and a phone bidder.
Yeah.
So suddenly we've got 10 bidders out of a crowd of about 30 or 40, maybe a bit more.
There's a lot of moving parts there. There was.
Yeah. And it was funny because it ended up, so we just passed your 420-ish that you thought and the 470. We ended up, I called it, we had a reserve in the end of 490. I called it on the mark. Well, I sent you in to get instructions at about, I think it was 510, 520.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the people inside couldn't really speak. You and I hadn't discussed that because we didn't think it was going to actually get reserved. They were just, so Rob just comes out with his thumb up in the air, and we ended up selling it for 555. So for 555, which relatively to where, the home was, it was about a 10 or 15% increase. And we had bidders right up to the end, didn't we? So sort of at each other's heels.
Absolutely. And the funny thing about that was the successful bidder in the end had only registered that morning. That was when they had just come to the auction. So you never know what's going to happen. You got to work the process.
Yeah.
Richard, thank you. Is there anything else that you think that in this short presentation on auctions that someone needs to be aware of?
Yeah, just really quickly. If you've done auctions, great. You'll probably have your auctioneer, and just keep in touch. If you haven't, or if you maybe did a while ago, get in touch with whoever's local to you. Because I've had one guy recently in South Fremantle, quite an expensive area. He just sort of pitched auction because we'd caught up had a coffee about a week before. The bloke was an old fellow, was a farmer. And he said, good. At least someone's bloody mentioned auction. You've got the business. And it was him and my friend, who was actually called Richard as well, he goes, Rich, it's Rich. How do I do an auction? Right. And that was great. He listed it and then got the help, but subsequently he's got the auction fever. Before you need it, get in touch with your auctioneer and just learn the basics of going through it. Ask them how they do it, because you don't want to look like a clown if someone suddenly says, how about auction? No one seems to mention that, because you'll be one of probably very few that are mentioning it, at least in Western Australia.
Yeah.
And you'll have a point of difference right away. So just learn it before you need it. Because I'd say 80% of my job here is training people and coaching them. And I love it because I like the process. I'd love more people to do it. So that would be my biggest advice.
Yep. So learn what you're doing. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And I think that's really smart. Build relationships with an auctioneer before you need an auctioneer. All the auctioneers that I've ever met love to have a chat, and they love to chat about auctions. So anyway, thank you so much, Richard Kerr, for taking time out of your schedule to share with us a little bit about auctions. And hopefully that was helpful to everybody. And we will see you guys on the next session for AMP in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.